Lucas had spent so many years on autopilot that he could almost predict his own life before it happened. Same alarm, same rush coffee, same traffic, same tired promise to start tomorrow. By the time he got home, the day already felt used up, and the week had quietly disappeared with it. Nothing dramatic, nothing obviously broken, just that strange, heavy feeling that life was happening near him, not really with him. And maybe that sounds familiar, because for most people, the biggest changes in life don't arrive with a bang. They creep in quietly, hidden inside the smallest decisions we repeat without thinking. The biscuit with the afternoon tea, the phone unlocked before we've even left the bed, the way we avoid a difficult conversation, delay a workout, or keep spending a little more than we should because, well, we deserve it. One small action becomes another, then another, until a pattern is running the show. That's exactly what was happening to Lucas. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't lacking willpower. He was trapped in a loop he couldn't see yet. And that's the interesting part about human behavior. So much of what we call choice is actually routine wearing a different shirt. Neuroscience helps explain why. Around 40% of our daily actions happen automatically, almost without conscious thought. Not because we're broken, but because the brain loves efficiency. It learns what to repeat, what to avoid, what gets a result fast. Over time, it starts taking shortcuts. Useful ones if the habit is good. Dangerous ones if it isn't. That's why a habit can quietly shape your health, your finances, your relationships, and even the kind of future you end up building. Lucas didn't know all that yet. He only knew he felt stuck. Tired in a way sleep didn't fix. Frustrated in a way success didn't touch. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, something small happened that made him pause. It wasn't a crisis. It was a pattern. A moment so normal most people would have missed it completely. But Lucas noticed it, and that was the beginning of everything. Because once you can see the pattern, you can start to change it. And the first step is much simpler than people think. For Lucas, the hardest part was realizing that nothing in his life looked dramatically broken. That was the trap. He wasn't in crisis. He was in repetition. Same alarm, same coffee, same rush commute, same promise to start tomorrow. And tomorrow kept arriving exactly like today. One evening, after another long day that seemed to dissolve into the next, he sat on the edge of the sofa and thought, "How did I get here?" It was a quiet question, but it carried the weight of years. What he didn't know yet was that his life was being guided by a loop. Not a mystical one, not a vague idea of self-control, but a very real pattern the brain loves because it saves energy. Trigger, routine, reward. That's the whole thing. A cue appears, the brain reaches for an automatic behavior. And if the outcome feels good enough, the loop gets stronger. Again and again. The remarkable part is that this process happens so smoothly that we often mistake it for personality, when really it's just programming that's been repeated enough times. And that's why so many of our daily actions run on autopilot. Studies suggest roughly 40% of what we do each day is habitual. 40%, nearly half of life, can be lived without a conscious decision. Think about that for a moment. The way you check your phone, the route you drive, the snack you reach for under stress, even the way you respond when someone pushes your buttons. None of that is random. It's the brain choosing the fastest road, not necessarily the best one. Lucas started noticing his own triggers. Stress at work, fatigue after lunch, the feeling of boredom that would creep in just before he opened social media for a minute. Each one seemed harmless on its own, but together they were shaping his days. "So it's not that I'm lazy," he muttered one night. The answer was simpler and more confronting than that. He wasn't lazy. He was conditioned. That realization changed everything, because if a habit is learned, it can be unlearned. If a loop was built, it can be rebuilt. The key isn't to fight the brain's nature, but to work with it. First, you identify the trigger. Then you replace the routine. Then you keep the reward, or create a new one strong enough to satisfy the brain's need for closure. It's practical, almost mechanical, but it's also deeply human. Because behind every habit, there's usually a need. Comfort, relief, control, belonging, escape. And once Lucas saw that, he began to understand something bigger. His future wasn't being decided by one huge choice. but by small, repeated ones he barely noticed. The good news? That meant change didn't have to be massive to be real. Sometimes it just starts with paying attention to what happens right before the automatic move. And in that pause, everything begins to open up. Lucas looked at the note on his fridge one last time, the one he'd written in a rush. Future starts today. It seemed simple enough, almost too simple. But now, after seeing how his days have been running on autopilot, the words felt different. He could finally see the pattern. The alarm was the trigger. The same sigh, the same phone check, the same breakfast, the same road, the same excuses. And behind every one of those repeats was a reward he'd never really questioned: comfort, distraction, relief. That was the strange part. Most habits don't survive because they're powerful. They survive because they're convenient. The brain loves to save effort, and over time it turns repeated behavior into a shortcut. That's why so much of life can feel like it's happening before we've even chosen it. The good news is that once you can see the loop, you can interrupt it. Not with willpower alone, but with design. So Lucas started small. He didn't try to rebuild his whole life in one morning. Instead, he looked for the trigger. When did the mindless scrolling begin? Right after coffee. So he changed the environment. The phone stayed in another room. A book sat on the table instead. Then he asked a better question. What reward was he really chasing? Not the screen itself, but a feeling of pause, a moment to breathe before the day began. Once he understood that, he could replace the routine without losing the reward. That's the real shift. Habits aren't just things you do. They're systems that shape who you become. Every small decision, repeated often enough, becomes a path. And every path, no matter how old, can be redirected. The man who once felt trapped in routine began to feel something new: control. Not perfect control, not a magical overnight transformation, but enough to make tomorrow look different from today. If this hits close to home, maybe it's because you've seen your own loop in it too. Maybe there's one habit quietly steering your mornings, your money, your health, or your relationships. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to take a closer look at what's triggering it. If you found this useful, leave a like so more people can see it. And tell me in the comments, which habit do you most want to change in your life? If you want more videos that explain how the mind really works, subscribe, because the way we build our days says more about our future than we usually realize.